You've let it out, honey. Put it in the book.
Okay, y'all hold up 1 second. I thought I was ready. I am not. So I had the intro going, and then I was like, oh, I need my water. So my apologies. Anyway, welcome to. Hold on. Okay. I think y'all should be able to hear me. All right. Welcome to another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I am your host, Jazz Monet. And at some point during this broadcast, I might get up and get some water. But the goal right now is actually to spend a little bit of time just talking to you guys, responding to what y'all have to say in the comments about the Cowboys' loss to the New Orleans Saints. It's weird because it's only been a little bit over 24 hours, but I feel like I personally, I'm just kind of over it. And maybe it's my fault. Maybe I watch too much content. But I just feel like, okay, this conversation is dead. However, one, I didn't want another Monday to go by without me talking to y'all because like last week I didn't get around to it and I was like, nah, I gotta be better. Mondays roll around, I gotta talk about what happened. And two, Mike McCarthy had a press conference and the coordinators had their press conferences. And I'm going to be honest, I haven't watched nearly as much film or as much of those press conferences as I would like. But I have watched enough to have a conversation. And I think it's a conversation that a lot of people want to have. JV's here. What's up, JV? And Clement is also here, or at least he was. I'm assuming that he's still here. And Clement has left a few comments that I'm going to read through in a few minutes. And Keystone is here. What's up? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hopping in the comments. I appreciate the engagement. So let me start with these comments from Clement, and then we'll go into the video. I was going to download them, but I'm going to be honest. Part of the reason why I haven't been doing Mondays is because it's a long ass day for me. So we're just going to try to stream them online. And I wrote down some timestamps, and we're going to talk about what I think are some of the most interesting quotes from Dak Prescott, from Mike McCarthy's two press conferences. And if y'all are still sticking around after that, we can do Zimmer's press conference. I need to listen to it again. So it'll be one of those kind of watch along situations, but we'll do it all. So Clement says, that's welcome. Thank you for welcoming everyone, Clement. The Cowboys get marched on by the Saints yesterday in Arlington. Yes, that happened. Mike McCarthy speaks after the game. Yep. Like and subscribe. Listen to the man. He knows what he's talking about. And time to respond this week as the 0-2 Ravens come to Arlington for a 3:25 p.m. kickoff on Sunday. Let's see if we can actually stop a downhill running game and actually run the ball in the game. That'll definitely be interesting to see. One thing I'm going to say before we get into the videos is while everybody was still doing their reactions on Twitter yesterday, I saw a tweet from Micah Parsons come across my feed, and he said something like, it's not Zim's fault, it's our fault. We didn't put in enough effort. It was something along those lines where he was saying that the guys didn't put in enough effort. And when I first saw that, I was just kind of like, I don't know, man. I feel like we can blame Zim for some of this. And then I started looking at some of the stats, some of the insights, and it was talking about Micah's time getting off and how it was like his fifth slowest time off the ball in like his entire career with the Cowboys. So I was like, okay, so Micah was at least moving slow. And then you start watching the film. And like I said, I haven't watched as much as I want to watch, but you start watching it and you kind of see a few guys getting beat up front, and it does kind of make you wonder, okay, how did that impact the linebackers? How did that impact pretty much everybody who was behind them, who was depending on them to do their jobs? And And maybe that does speak to a lack of execution, at least. Maybe that, like, some people try to draw that line between effort and execution, right? Like, oh, they put in the effort, but the execution wasn't there. Whatever you want to call it, effort, execution, the job was not getting done. One of the things, for those who don't know, I am a personal trainer, and I've been trying to shift more towards training athletes. And to do that, I've been talking to other people who train athletes. And one of the things that I was taught to always talk to defensive linemen about is that you don't ever want to go backwards. Like, that's one of the things that was like drilled home. Like, they should never be going backwards. And I was watching that film, and I saw a good bit of going backwards, more than I feel like I can dismiss as like, oh, that was a bad rep for that guy. It's like, nah, he was consistently going backwards. So if by the time I go live again, it's probably going to be time to talk about the Ravens. But if I see anything significant that nobody else brings up, I will come back and talk to you guys about it. But that was just one of the things that I noticed, that, yeah, I think Micah Parsons was right, that the execution wasn't there. And when it comes to the shortcomings of the defense, we can't blame it all on them. All right. Anything else? Keystone said the Eagles got a taste of Kellen Moore the first 2 games. They should be 0-2. Man, I was actually watching the end of that game while I was trying to get stuff together for this. And I didn't watch most of the game, so I can't speak to what they were doing the entire time. But I even heard the announcers say towards the end, like, well, why didn't they just do this? And that would have been a much easier way to seal the win. And I will say, Kellen Moore has surprised me this season, because I didn't think he would make such good use of Saquon Barkley. We've never known him to just be that good with runners. So I thought that he was going to kind of waste Saquon's presence on the team. But Saquon has bounced back, which is good. I'm always a proponent of players, doing the most with their career and being able to bounce back and in their career on their terms. So props to him as an individual. But yeah, so Kellen Moore was doing some good things, but it sounds like he disappointed a lot of people tonight. Now, that wasn't just him, though. Speaking of Saquon, like, what I did see was a drop pass. What I did see was Darius Slay, who was like buffering, frozen, whatever you want to call it, on that pass into the end zone. So yeah, there's definitely blame to go around, and I'm gonna leave that to the Eagles content creators to take care of. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni do against the Saints, because the Saints have a hell of a scheme, especially on offense. I know there are people who are trying to explain away what happened, but I mean, even before the game happened, I was on Girls Talk, Boys Talk, and I was talking. One of the questions that came up was, what is the defense going to have to do to have success against the Saints? And I was like, well, they're going to have to do their jobs. They're going to have to make sure they're clear on their assignments. They're going to have to not allow themselves to get confused, to get spun around, to get put in a blender, because the way that offense is set up, it's like it's set up basically to make defenses have to hesitate. You've got a lot of snaps from under center. You've got a lot of play action. And so it's and when I say hesitate, in the NFL, hesitation or waiting too long can literally be a fraction of a second. When it comes to elite athletes and really good coaches, sometimes a fraction of a second is all they need to take advantage of and get a lot of yards off a play that, had it been run a different way, they might not have gotten as many yards from. And so when I was like studying up on them to be able to talk about them, I'm just like, yeah, our defense is definitely going to have to have their heads on straight, make sure they're clear on what they're doing. And when I was watching the game, I was like, is the lack of clarity what's causing them to hesitate? And I'm still not sure on that, to be honest. I'm wondering if they were seeing what was in front of them and they weren't sure, or they weren't confident in what they were seeing, and that made them hesitate just long enough, because Alvin Kamara was getting like 4+ yards before contact. there was already an issue with him like just being good at getting yards after contact, right? But against the Cowboys, he was getting 4+ yards before contact. And so I was just like, what is making them give them so much time? Like, why are they giving them so much space? And the only thing I could think of is they're unsure, they're hesitant, and Kubiak is taking advantage. I had to think about that because I've heard people say Shanahan so much today. And if I were Kubiak, I'd be kind of upset. Like, yeah, I'm a distant relative of the Shanahan tree, but can I get some credit? Like, can y'all say my name? Let me see what else y'all are talking about. Clement says, oh no, Sirianni threw Jalen Hurts under the bus after the game on a 3rd and 3 play after the Falcons stupidly went for it on 4th down in their own territory with 5:28 left in the game. I don't know anything about that. I'm gonna have to look into that. Willie, hi Willie, says, hey Jazz, yesterday was embarrassing and I'm not blaming Dak. The defense got pushed around and Micah is right. That's on them and not on Zimmer. So it sounds like you're one of the people who's just putting it all on the players, which I'm not going to say that you're wrong. I find it interesting where people are deciding to focus when it comes to the disappointment that a lot of people experienced yesterday. And Mike McCarthy made me rage after that 4th down call. Oh no. Clement says the defense was pushed around by the Saints in the running game. Yeah. And they were loose in coverage during the motion by the Saints offense. Yeah, I noticed that too. And that was another thing that made me wonder if they were being hesitant. Because it's like, even if you do nothing but compare what the Saints did versus what the Cowboys did, the Saints defensively were a lot more aggressive. Now, they had a little bit more room to be, right? The Cowboys were running these long developing plays where there was a lot of stuff going on after the snap, but still behind the line of scrimmage. And it was run from shotgun. So the Saints could clearly see what was going on. And what was going on was taking a long time to happen. So they're like, we're just going to go after them. We're going to attack. They didn't have a reason not to. Whereas the Saints, their offense, a lot of what they were doing was disguised a little bit better. And so, like I said earlier, maybe that was the reason for a little bit of the hesitation, a little bit of the slowness that we saw. And just the Cowboys defense did not seem as aggressive. And I don't know if we'll ever get a clear answer as to why that was, right? Because it would mean somebody being really, really honest about what was going through the heads of the players, what they were saying on the sideline, what kind of feedback they were getting, so on and so forth. And I do believe, and rightfully so, there are some things that they're not going to share with us. Like if guys were going to the sideline and they're like, we were confused. We thought they were going to do this and they did that. And, that's how dude got so many yards. Nobody's ever going to go up to the podium or in front of a camera and actually tell us that, So Willie says, Jazz, Cowboys need to fix the running game on offense because you can't wait for CeeDee Lamb to bail you out. Just saying. Especially not now. And that's not his fault. Yesterday there weren't many other options. So even if a defender were just to play the numbers game, statistically, they're not getting a lot of yards per play. At some point, they're going to go to CeeDee Lamb, even if there's 3 people on them. At some point, they're going to get desperate enough, and they're going to need to go to their best weapon. So we're just going to sit on CeeDee Lamb and wait for it to happen. They're either going to go to him and we'll be able to mess up the play, or there'll be an interception. They're going to make a mistake. The Saints showed us how we should be using Turpin. With who? Who are you suggesting they use that we should use Turpin in the same way? I'm curious. I think I know who you're talking about, but I want to see if I'm thinking of the same person you're thinking. Okay, well, I'm waiting for that response from JV. And I'm sorry that y'all can probably hear my chair squeaking in the background. I still haven't set up my podcast area. I work too much. I don't know what to tell y'all. And it's not like y'all have asked. But I know if this light goes out again, somebody's going to ask. Okay. Let's start with Dak. So we've got his post game, and he said a few things. Oh my goodness, that is a scary face that the video froze on. JV said, Rashid Shaheed, you think we should use Turpin the same way they use Rashid Shaheed? Shaheed's speed played a big role in how they use him. And I'm just trying to think if I believe that Turpin is quite that fast. I'm not against it. If they were to try it, I would not be mad. I would not be mad. I'm just not necessarily sure that we should expect the same results, but I wouldn't be mad if they tried it. I think we get enough of a benefit. And that's the thing about like copying other people's plays. Like sometimes you do have to account for the differences in personnel, but it's almost like one of those shoot for the moon. If you miss, at least you'll land among the stars kinds of things. Like maybe you won't get the exact same results, but you might discover a new use for a player or just something that you can add to the playbook that works better than what you already got. And that's the thing. I think that's why so many people are asking about the Cowboys' creativity. It's not that they're necessarily saying like the Cowboys should be doing what the Saints or the 49ers are doing. They should look exactly like that. But it's just like you see what they're doing, and it's like we can't imitate some of that. Like we can't borrow a little bit of that. There's nothing we can learn from that. We can't do something that looks a little bit like that. We can't do a little bit more motion. Maybe a little bit more under center. We've seen Dak take snaps from under center. We know he can do it. Could he do it a little bit more? I think that's what people are wanting. Big Flock says Chauncey got chokeslammed. That's a big man to chokeslam. Our D-line was just flat out bullied, and nobody was showing any effort outside of Tank. And Dono is a box safety. He shouldn't play cover 2 with Hooker, Wanye, and Bell. It is. Y'all have a lot of thoughts and opinions, and I appreciate it. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just a lot to work with here. Willie says what he's saying is that the way the Saints use Shaheed, the Cowboys are use Turpin. Yeah, we got it. We're on the same page there. Appreciate y'all. Sergeant Thomas says, finally, I got to see you live. Yes, you're here. Thanks for showing up. Okay, let me pull up this video. I love talking to you guys, but we got to get to this video. All right, present. And you'll see what I mean by this scary face that Dak is making. And I think the first thing that I wanted to talk about is about here.
We should have been, and now we just simply have got to reset. We've got to respond. We're not going undefeated. Hadn't been done in 50 years. Woo, surprise. So it's about getting back to it and finding a way to respond. This team on a high. Why you can't listen to other people's opinions and read. I don't think the guys as far as riding a high, I know I wasn't personally. I don't think the guys in the locker room.
And then to have today, is this just the way the league goes?
Yeah, I mean, it's the NFL. I talk about each and every week. No games are played on paper. As far as riding a high, I know I wasn't personally. I don't think the guys in the locker room necessarily were. I mean, I talked about how much meat we left on the bone offensively. And that's simply why you can't listen to other people's opinions and read with you guys right, respectfully. I mean, yeah, y'all may have put this team on a high more than we should have been, and now we just simply have got to reset. We've got to respond. We're not going.
So I'm gonna let him finish, but I want to comment on what he said about not reading what those guys write. He was asked about the team being on a high from week 1 and that kind of affecting how they perform week 2. And what he said was that he didn't feel like they were on too much of a high. On that, I have to give him a little bit of credit. And this was something else I mentioned on Girls Talk, Boys Talk, where we were talking to some of the guys in the locker room, and I was like, hey, I don't get the idea that they are overlooking this game or taking the Saints for granted. They all seem to be disappointed in how things went week 1, especially the second half. They wanted to see more consistency. They wanted to see more scoring. And they're looking forward to improving upon that in week 2. So that's definitely a true statement. And he says, I don't remember his exact words, but in so many words, he's like, people should be careful when they listen to what you guys write, respectfully. And that's not that respectful of a statement, but he's not wrong. Even when it comes to people who are in the building, who are beat writers, a lot of the articles have become very clickbaity, very, very much catering to the casual fan perspective, with the exception of some people, obviously. And, it's the people that we talk about often. Y'all know who we're talking about. But yeah, there are a lot of people who are in that room with him as he's doing this press conference who will misrepresent how players feel, how they're reacting to certain things for the sake of getting a certain reaction to what they write. So not wrong.
Undefeated, hadn't been done in 50 years. Woo, surprise. So it's about getting back to it, and finding a way to respond to put the best team on the field next week.
Nick Harris, Forward Star Telegram. What's your assessment of the run game today? And I know the game kind of got away from the run game, but in the first half, what would be your assessment of it?
Yeah, I've got to watch the tape. Like you said, game kind of got out of hand a little bit there, where we're forced to just throw the ball. And a lot of times, I hand the ball off, I carry out my fake. So I can't tell if it was the back or if it's the line or what it may be. So after I watch the tape, probably could give you a better assessment. But when the score's that way, you can't continue to run the ball. We had a drive there, I guess, when the second half that one drive came out. And I know it ate up a lot of clock, and they get the ball back and the third quarter's ending. So at that point, you realize, hey, we've got to score. We've got to score fast if we want to come back into this thing.
That's fair. Put a pin on what he said about the clock, because Mike McCarthy makes a comment that I'm going to tie into what he's saying there, when it comes to the clock and how long the plays are taking and things of that nature. But first, I want to talk about what he said about, okay, we're not going to go undefeated, woo, surprise. And there were people who had a problem with that. And a lot of the people who had a problem with it were the same people who had a problem with the comment that he made about either be a fan or don't. And neither of those statements was incorrect. And I think one of the things that I'm noticing about Dak so far this season, starting, probably at some point into the preseason, he's just a lot less emotional. There was a time where you would ask Dak how he felt about something, and he would try to respond by describing an emotion, describing thoughts, and now he's just kind of like, whatever. Like, I'm past it. I'm already thinking about how to do better. Like, if y'all want to sit there and stew in it, do it. I'm not doing it. And I think fans feel away because a lot of times when fans experience a loss, they hold on to it. But for an athlete that's expected to perform, holding on to it like that can literally be detrimental. And so I would encourage people to not take it personally when Dak says things like that. I don't think he's trying to be dismissive towards fans, but he's being asked about himself. He's being asked about his experience and about what he thinks. And he's telling the truth. And that's how he needs to respond. He does not have space. These weeks go by so fast. He does not have space to hold on to it and just feel bad about his mistakes. He's got to fix them. He's got to fix them. And just the emotions don't necessarily help with that. And one more thing I'm going to say, when he talks about, okay, I do my play action and then, yada, yada, yada. I also think that's something we don't think about enough when it comes to asking these players questions about what happened on the field, because a lot of times the questions that fans and that reporters have, they come from a lot of vantage points that these players don't have, especially in a press conference that's happening right after the game. Like, by the time they're asked about the game, we've seen multiple camera angles. We've heard announcers' commentary. We've seen what people are saying on Twitter. We've seen what people are saying in our text group chat. We've seen it in slow motion. We've seen freeze frames. Like, little moments that pissed us off have been dissected to no end via word, via spoken word, via picture, via video. And all they have is what they remember from the job they did on the field, and maybe some whatever they see on the tablet and a few conversations with players and coaches, which, it's just not as much as what we're looking at for hours and during commercials and all that. So a little bit of grace there, I think would be good. Let's keep going just a little bit.
The week, Jake's much more than just a tight end on Sunday. I mean, he's an aggressor. He brings a physical nature to this group. He's got a mentality that other guys feed off of that's very contagious. And but as I said, those other guys did play well. They did their job. They stepped up. They made some plays, and just got away from us.
Just what were your emotions when Zach went down, and then also when he was able to come back into the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to think about all that. When he goes down, wishing the best for him. Tapped him, but then when he gets right back, he's right back in the huddle. You forget that he was injured, and a guy like that's a competitor. He's going to do whatever he can to get back on the field. So thankful that he was okay.
I'm gonna go forward just a little bit.
Scoring touchdown every fourth. So, going against your defense all the time and how great those battles were back and forth. So as you're sitting there today on the sidelines and the Saints are scoring touchdown after touchdown, 6 consecutive possessions, how surprising is that to you?
Yeah, it's surprising, but it's the NFL. Hell, I'm thinking it'd be nice to be doing that on our side of the ball more than I'm worried or critiquing our defense. Obviously, that's a good team. I mean, Alvin Kamara's looked damn good. Derek Carr put the ball where he needed to. That offense is rolling right now. I mean, we're 2 games in, but I'm not naive to their stats of, or whatever it was, the 9 straight, and then they walked into this game and continued on that. So, I mean, credit to the play caller over there, to that team of coming out, being ready on a noon start. And, it made it tough on our defense, which made it tough on the whole team. So I'm trying to get there with our offense.
I actually like the fact that he admitted that. And I'm hoping it has some impact on decision-making. I don't know if it's possible at this point to completely overhaul everything. But like I said earlier, if they were to even just borrow a couple of things, or even just take a couple of lessons in terms of how long it takes those plays to develop. I wish I had, so where I watch videos, I don't have them downloaded. And I guess I could try to share, maybe, I don't know, tomorrow, later this week. If it's still a relevant conversation, we can. I should have pulled up some of the plays just to give you an example of what I'm talking about. But if you are a person who does get a chance to watch, just compare the time for the play to develop and for the Saints to start getting positive yardage, compare that to the same components for the Cowboys offense. It's like night and day. It's night and day. And I don't know if it's maybe one of those situations where they practice it and they run it correctly, so they didn't notice, and it worked against the Browns, and so it's not something that they felt the need to fix. Because it's something that I'm just I didn't even think about when they were dealing with the Browns. And I'm it's not like they're running a different offense, right? So the same issue must have been there, but now we're dealing with a defense that responds to that differently. And as y'all have been saying in the comments, it is a copycat league. So any of our future opponents who see that and see how it works, they're probably going to do the same thing. And not only that, but actually, I'm going to get to that point later. Hold on, let me keep going. I think there's one more thing that I wanted to get to from Dak.
Intelligence, I guess you could say, and excited, honestly excited to get back to work and tomorrow and turn this page.
No. Calvin Watkins, Dallas Morning News. After 2 weeks, how would you assess how you've played? And I asked you that because last week in Cleveland, you said you didn't play that well. So after 2 weeks, how would you assess what you've done so far?
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, my expectations are crazy high and go off of wins. So I'm not going to give you maybe a realistic answer, I guess you can say. I'm seeing it well. I'm seeing it well, putting the ball where I want to. As I said, that one interception is going to get at me just because Tyron made a hell of a play, did a good job of playing through one route, getting to the other. But outside of that, maybe a few more throws that I want back. But as far as seeing the defense, getting the offense in what I want, in the position and the plays that we want to, I feel good about it and confident that we're going to continue to get better as a team. And I am particularly.
Improvement in the offense.
All right. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about from his post-game press conference. I'm gonna read a few of y'all's comments and then we'll get to what in the world. Hold on. I cannot wait till I start using a different system for my podcast. I'm so over StreamYard. Okay, I'm gonna read a few of y'all's comments and then we'll get to the next video. Big Flock says, real athletes put L's behind them. We learn from the loss, but we don't dwell. We got to get ready for the next opponent. Exactly. I'm glad y'all are not on the boat of he should be more, I don't know. What are some of the words I've had? He should be more considerate of how the fans feel. Like this should affect him the way it affects us. No, it shouldn't. Because some of y'all hold on to stuff from like 2 years ago. And I don't want that from my quarterback. Let's see. Flock also says, if Dalvin and Flournoy aren't on the field next week, I'm gonna be livid. Oh man. I don't want to see them give up on Deuce quite yet, only because I feel like the situations that he's been put in to try to get yards haven't been ones that really play to his strength for real. I just feel like he hasn't been given the kind of chance that I want him to have in order to see what he can really do. And so if they were to sit him down, it would just feel unfair to him. Unless they just really believe, hey, the way these teams are coming at us, we're not going to be able to implement what would work better for you. Okay, if that ends up being the case. But I would really like to see them give him a chance to show off like what he's actually good at. I don't know who this person is, but yeah, please don't come in my chat asking for money. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's go to Mike McCarthy's post-game press conference. There's just a couple of things from that, and then we'll get to the one that he did today. Hold on, y'all are still talking about Flournoy. Nick Fox says Flournoy could be wide receiver 2, and Overshown is better than Clark. We're going to talk about Overshown stats as well. Zeke and Dalvin is a tandem we need, and use Deuce as a gadget guy. I think that could work. He could be a gadget guy. We didn't really get to see as much of it as we wanted to in the preseason. I think they attempted it one time, and the pass was too high. Not because he's short. Trey Lance had several high passes. Like there were several balls that were placed in places that weren't really optimal for the receiver to get them. So yeah, maybe that could work. Okay. Back to this. Mike McCarthy post-game week 2.
David Moore, Dallas Morning News. How do you describe just such a wide variance from how you played in the opener to how you played here today, 8 days later?
I think, going back to my comments during the week, I felt like we were playing a playoff caliber team. I think you look at the preparation coming into it, look at their games last year, which obviously you do in week 2. And they played well last week. Very disappointed in the way we played, from top down, starting myself here. The finish, particularly, as far as the.
Now, one thing, I'm pausing it just because of what he said about looking at what they did last year, because it's week 2. And if you've been paying attention to the Saints, they weren't exactly the same team last year. So this is my first time really thinking about that. I'm wondering if that played a role in some of the things that they did, because correct me if I'm wrong, but like they just got Kubiak this year. This is his first year with the Saints, right? So I don't know why they would look at last year, unless he's talking about defense. I don't know. But yeah, I personally would have gone more off what they did in week 1.
Different battles as you go through the game, the run game battle, we didn't win that on either side. Obviously the turnover battle, they won that. So I thought they did a better job finishing plays, and they hit their big plays. I think we were -3 at halftime. I don't know what it ended up, but we needed to keep pace. Complimentary football. Defense was struggling obviously. Throughout the first 3 quarters. And we need to score touchdowns in the red zone. And we had some execution challenges that they were better than we were. So if we could have kept pace with them and kept that to a 1-score, possible 2-score game, then you come down a stretch and you're competing to win. So you need adversity games like this. You definitely don't want to ever perform like this. They played well. Give them credit. But yeah, I think like all of us, we're disappointed with our performance today. But the true reality is we'll take the film tomorrow. That'll tell the complete story. And there's no burn the tape. I'll sit here, so we don't. That's not the way I've ever operated. So.
Four-star Clarence Hill, All City, Dallas. With all due respect, the offense need to keep pace was a theme that was the last time we were at AT&T Stadium against Green Bay. I hate bringing back Green Bay, but how do you explain the lack of resistance on defense? You couldn't stop them on third down. You couldn't stop run. You kept giving up big plays in the passing game.
Well, I don't think the last time we played here has anything to do with it. I understand the convenience of the criticism, and obviously I'm on the other side of it. So, but yeah, I think we've had changes on defense. Some of the changes we made was to put the emphasis on the run defense. Was not evident today. I mean, no doubt about it. They got the ball on our perimeter, time and time again. And they're in the second level. So once again, it's I got to quit saying we need to play much better. I need to coach better, and you never want to play that way, especially at home.
So he was asked about basically the comparison that a lot of people are making between the loss to the Saints on Sunday and the loss to the Green Bay Packers in last year's playoffs. And he's like, I understand the convenience of the criticism. I can talk, y'all, I promise. He said he can understand the convenience of the criticism, but he doesn't feel like those two losses are related. And I think he's going to have a hard time convincing fans of that. There are a lot of similarities, and don't get me wrong, I completely understand that the two losses are not exactly the same. And that's kind of the point that I leaned on at first. But I don't think the criticism is being made simply because it's convenient and it's like a low-hanging fruit sort of comparison, so to speak. I really do think that people are attributing this to maybe the mindset or the effort of the players. And they're looking at Mike McCarthy as a head coach and saying, like, okay, there's something that you should be doing different so that this doesn't keep happening. So while I get what he's saying, that the two losses are different, I wish he would have kind of put a little bit more effort into addressing what's obviously the concerns of the fans in this moment. Let's see. We're going to go forward just a couple of minutes.
Just the way we were stressed, I think, starting, with us on offense, we went to more of a sub package game. So, when you do that, it's a little more stress on your edges. But and once again, going through the specifics of the video, give you a clearer picture of that. I think, their offense versus our defense, they, the shifts and motions in the run game, particularly the edge stuff, the ball on the perimeter, was time and time again. So obviously we're going to have to have a good answer for that moving forward, because it's just like anything in this league. When you put it on tape, you're going to see it again and again. So we put a lot on tape today.
He's not wrong about that. Hold on, I'm gonna go back to before that just to make sure you hear what the question was.
Team defense for again going through the specifics. We went to more, with us on sounds.
Elwin Henderson, Gilmer Mirror. Mike, did they do anything you hadn't planned for?
Well, I just think, the commonality, just the way we were stressed, I think, starting, with us on offense, we went to more of a sub package game. So, when you do that, it's a little more stress on your edges. But, and once again, going through the specifics of the video, give you a clearer picture of that. I think, their offense versus our defense, they, the shifts and motions in the run game, particularly the edge stuff, the ball on the perimeter, was time and time again. So obviously we're going to have to have a good answer for that moving forward, because it's just like anything in this league. When you put it on tape, you're going to see it again and again. So we put a lot on tape today.
I'm gonna say that's kind of weird, because he was asked about things that surprised him or that they didn't prepare for, and he was like, "Yeah, the ball on the perimeter, time and time again." And I'm just like, I don't know. Against the Panthers, Alvin Kamara kind of did that over and over again. Assuming that's what he's referring to. He wasn't really specific there, but I don't know. I'm gonna speak for myself. Watching the Saints offense Sunday, they didn't do a lot that surprised me. Like it's a good offense, a really good scheme, very well executed. But I can't say I saw anything that was like, oh man, I didn't see them doing that. There were a few things that were like, okay, so like how they used Taysom Hill. I think they used Taysom Hill in just a couple of more positions than how they used him against the Panthers. But we know he can play quarterback. We've seen him do that before. We know that he can be moved around on the offense. So it's not like, oh my goodness, you're moving this guy to a different position. It was just like, okay, how often are you going to do it? When is it going to happen? And what position is he going to? So, it was things like that it's like, okay, things were slightly different, but there was nothing that was so surprising that you're just like, oh my God, I didn't even know they could do that. It's kind of weird response. Chris Johnson said Derrick Henry is looking at his chops watching our defense. Oh, I bet. I hope they come up with something. They've got to figure something out. Let's fast forward a few more minutes, listen to like one or two more clips from this, and we'll go to the one from today.
Fourth quarter, and so I thought Dak did a good job being patient. Taking a shot.
Slipping away from you on one side like it did defensively. Mike, when a game kind of starts slipping away from you on one side like it did defensively today, how does that impact the other side of the ball as far as when you see it getting away? Is it common for a team to kind of start more mistakes as they press more, or is that something you say you just can't get into?
Yeah, we went to a 2-minute operation there at the end of the third, early fourth quarter. And so I thought Dak did a good job being patient, taking the check downs and that's what you have to do. And then we, Donald gets the big stop there, with the turnover, and, we didn't capitalize on it. So, that's when I thought the game kind of swung. That was our chance to swing it back and try to get it to a 2-score game.
Getting back to the run game offensively, can you just talk about the Deuce Vaughn package? We lose Deuce and Cavante a lot early on, and what we were trying to accomplish there.
Well, there were some run pass options there. So, I think it's just more how the ball was distributed. But yeah, we're trying to make sure all those guys are involved. It's you have game plan, you have personnel groups and matchups you like to attack, and it's a long year too. We're trying to play these guys and be as versatile as possible. We got the quarterback that can handle it and manage it. So that's really what that's all about.
Lack of a big play part of it. I mean, you had a lot of long drives, but when you do all those drives, you have to be perfect.
Yeah, look at the depth of their safety. It's different than last week. So. That was one of the things disappointing from last week was, the opportunity for potential big plays, but, they're going to be deeper in the deepest and match you. And so sometimes you got to be a little more patient, which we've shown, we've been able to do. But when you get down in there, you got to hit your shots.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
So I'm going to read some of y'all's comments real quick. But while I'm reading these, I want to know what y'all think about his response to the question about Deuce Vaughn. So he was asked about using Deuce Vaughn, And he was like, oh, there's some RPOs in there. And I'm like, I don't even know if that's really the best option for saying, like, okay, how are we going to get Deuce Vaughn involved? Like, oh yeah, when there's RPO. Like, I feel like if you want to get Deuce Vaughn involved, you need to be like a little bit more intentional about it. It needs to be something designed for him to do well. Yeah? No? Y'all agree, disagree? What do y'all think? Cody. Hi, Cody. How's it going? Cody says, what has me is if we don't make moves, we will not go any further in the playoffs. Last year, our 5 losses looked a lot like this one from just a defensive perspective against this scheme. That's what a lot of people have been talking about today. That's why he was asked about the loss to Green Bay. And Mike McCarthy at least is telling us that they're not associated. So hopefully he has a plan, in spite of the fact that he doesn't seem to agree that there's a pattern. And that's all I can say about that. But Cody, what has you is what has a lot of people right now. Cody also says, it's like those losses showed our deficiencies and we didn't address them. We may win 12 games again, but I'm looking for indicators like there was last year. Buffalo, for instance. Yeah, 100%. And I think another thing to think about is that I feel like last season, the deficiencies kind of changed. Last season, they were doing that trimester thing, remember? And so the offense was looking kind of lackluster. And then CeeDee Lamb threw a fit and everybody called him a big baby, but then he got his way and the offense looked amazing. And so the deficiencies of the Cowboys kind of evolved throughout the season. But now you're just seeing like glaring deficiencies in week 2 that people can now plan for. So I feel like that could lead to even worse results, even more people copying what has worked against us. They're going to have to like really get on top of changing and adjusting if they want to do well. Didn't mean to put that one up. But Chris has a point. Deuce and Turpin looked so small out there and flew back every time they got touched. I wouldn't say they got touched. They got pushed around. They got knocked down. Hi, Toxic. Toxic Splendid. Good to see you. And Cody says, finally, it might be smoke and mirrors from Mike McCarthy to not give Baltimore any indicators. That's fair. That's fair. JV said, I can't think of a proper scheme for Deuce Vaughn, but I'm sure Kubiak, LaFleur, and Shanahan can. I think it would mean trying to duplicate some of the ways that he had success in the preseason. Now, it's different situations, right? A lot of the reasons why he had success in the preseason was because he was up against defenses that aren't as good. But what it shows you is that if he knows where he's going, if there's space where he's going, if you can kind of get him to the outside where he can use his agility, he can actually get you some yards. He can also get open and catch a short pass, you know? So I feel like those are the times that we've seen the best production from Deuce Vaughn. So if you want to still have him be a productive member of the offense, you've got to find ways to duplicate that. And just in my opinion, at least the way they've been using him in week 1 and week 2, they haven't really set him up to duplicate any of that, is all I'm saying. Tim Okage says, Vaughn needs the right touches, not just attempts, actually scheme for him. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Actually scheme for him. And same with Turpin, play to your team's strengths. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I mean, I don't get me wrong. I think there are some players who you can put him out there and they will just get it done. And Deuce Vaughn, I love him to death. He's not necessarily one of those players. But if you do scheme for him, if you do put him in the right situation, he can do some amazing things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with fans wanting to see that happen for him. Okay, that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and move on to today's video from Mike McCarthy. And we're going to start, I think, like a minute in. I might just start from the beginning and let it play. Oh, it's muted.
Range in September because you have less of a sample size.
Thanks for saying that, David.
But from week 1 to week 2, that was a pretty dramatic swing. Do you read more into it, or do you try to put it in that context?
Oh no, I think it's part of your your data for evaluation. I'm a huge believer in you have education, and really is part of your preparation, and then you go play it. That's the application of it. Then you evaluate it and start all over again. We need to be better, in this week's preparation. We weren't quick to the first punch, so, with that, that's the confidence, and just being totally on top of the details of, each and every contest. And I thought that they finished better than we did. So, those are two of the biggest constants throughout the evaluation process today with the players. So, and, we need to learn from it.
And in this too, when you're talking about, it's about preparation.
So for anyone wondering, he does explain later in this presser what he means by they were quicker to the punch. So we'll address that when we get to that part of the press conference.
And response, which goes beyond just scheme or preparation sometimes. How did you feel about the team's response when things started going against it very early in that game?
I thought the emotional was, as far as the focus was good. All the feedback from the coaches, the interactions, the corrections on the sidelines, halftime. There was really never no blink. Everybody felt that we're going to get back, and momentum. Change the momentum with some consistency. The disappointment, obviously, on defense was an inability to win first and second down, and never really getting into an opportunity to rush the passer, so they controlled the sticks and predominantly with the, with their action pass game and run game. So, and then, offensively, our biggest, was not scoring touchdowns. We felt if we could have just, went 1 for 1 and slugged it out. I mean, would we have 14-play drive, 13-play drive, 9-play drive? So, I mean, the ability to drive the ball was there. We just didn't put in the end zone. So, and then, then it got away from us here in the fourth quarter.
Okay, so I'm going to pause right there because I was a little bit disappointed in that response, and I'm going to tell you why. So he says the ability to drive the ball was there. They just didn't put it in the end zone. Now, that might be kind of like what y'all were talking about earlier, where maybe what his responses are a little bit of smoke and mirrors to not give Baltimore an idea of what he's going to do. But either way, I'm going to tell y'all why I didn't like this answer. And if I should give him a little bit more room, cut him a little bit of slack, well, that's on me. But the thing is, it's like when you say that, you're like, the ability to drive was there, but you just didn't put it in the end zone. Even had you put it in the end zone, you might not have necessarily been able to match what they were doing just because of the amount of effort and the amount of time that it took to get what they did get. So I use Pro Football Reference for this, and they have stats for how long the drives took. And actually, hold on, let me copy and paste this. I'm gonna put this down. I think y'all can still hear me. Let me copy and paste this, and I'm going to share the screen because I was about to read all these times, and I don't know if y'all are like me. I'm a very visual person, so I'm just like, let me not do this. All right, we're going to stop sharing this for a second. We'll come back here. Present, share. We're going to share this. Okay. So, the time of possession was about even. So it was, if you've ever been to Pro Football Reference, there's a lot of information on these screens. So New Orleans had the ball for 30 minutes, 31 seconds, and Dallas had the ball for 29 minutes, 29 seconds. So almost even time of possession, but you end up with such a drastic difference in point scores, 44-19. So if we come back over here to the spreadsheet, my first question was, okay, what about if we just account for the drives where points were scored? Was that also even? So I love using Excel, guys. If we equals this plus this plus this plus this plus that. Okay. So the time spent on scoring drives for the Cowboys was 22 minutes and 23 seconds. And if we do the same thing for the Saints, we've got this 9 seconds is crazy, y'all. I remember that I was about to call it a drive, that play. 23 seconds is also crazy. Okay, so even when you just go by the drives where they scored points, you're still looking at 22 minutes and 23 seconds to score 19 points versus 22 minutes and 20 seconds. And even if you look at the yards, so we'll do the same thing for the yards. So we'll do this. I should have done this ahead of time. I'm going to do this ahead of time next time. If y'all like this kind of thing. If y'all are like, yes, let's get into the stats of it all, I will do this ahead of time next week just for y'all. Okay, so similar time of possession for the entire game. Also, very similar time of possession when it comes to the drives that they scored on. 3-second difference. But in that same amount of time, they were able to move the ball down the field 385 yards compared to the Cowboys' 255 yards. They were able to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 touchdowns and 1 field goal compared to the Cowboys' 1 touchdown and 4 field goals. And they were able to move the ball 385, like 130 yards more than the Cowboys. So when Mike McCarthy says, oh, yeah, the ability to drive the ball was there, we just didn't get it into the end zone, I'm just like, yeah, but this is what people are talking about when they say that everything the Cowboys did looked hard. Because to say that y'all had the ball for the same amount of time, but y'all were short by that many yards, that means that you weren't doing enough to get the ball down the field. So it's not like, oh, yeah, the ability to drive the ball was there. Was it really? Or did y'all just so happen to get positive yardage sometimes? Because, like, let's be real, some of those run plays, like, they look kind of scary. And it looks like they got a little bit lucky sometimes, right? So I would have liked to see more attempts down the field. And yes, I know, like, because of their coverage, because of things that they were doing on the defensive end, Dak had to check down a lot. But even that's something that you can create a scheme to mitigate, right? If we want to be able to take more shots down the field, then you have to create those opportunities. No team is just going to give it to you. Like, one of the things, and this is what I mean by I haven't watched enough film, I can't remember if the Saints did this specific thing against the Cowboys. They probably did, but I remember watching them against the Panthers. And so they'll do this thing where the players that are going to block for Alvin Kamara go in motion, and then Alvin Kamara is in motion behind them, right? And what that did a couple of times, at least for the Panthers, was it caused people to kind of move around in response to where the middle of the field became open. And so Derek Carr would just be like, oh, well, I'll just place the ball there. On the flip side, if they didn't move, then it's like, all right, well, Alvin Kamara is going to take it and he's going to get his yards because he's very aggressive. He's able to get yards after contact, right? And so that's just like one very simple example of them doing something in terms of motion and how they use the threat of what their players can do to basically create an opportunity to get the ball down the field. And then there were just times where, like, you know, folks on the defense just got burned, which is a whole different discussion. But I don't know. I really wasn't satisfied with his response of the ability to drive the ball was there, because I'm like, even that ability to drive the ball wasn't enough. It's not like if you had just kept doing that, you could have matched what the Saints were doing. Because, like, part of the issue, and let me look back at this, but we know when Dak Prescott doesn't have a solid run game and he has to pass the ball a lot, statistically, mistakes start to happen. So let's even say statistically you got more first downs, but you got those yards in the same manner that you got all these other yards. Then that means you would have been passing the ball more, there would have been more room for mistakes, and we might have actually seen more interceptions. We might have seen more turnovers, you know? So I don't know. I just felt like that was a very simplified answer to what's a little bit more complex of a problem than what he let on. Y'all can let me know what y'all think in the comments, but we'll go back to this video. Y'all have a lot of thoughts. I'm gonna have a time reading through these comments. All right, back to this.
Clarence Hill, All City, Dallas. So much talk about the scheme and going against that offense. Was it Micah said it was more of an effort issue than a scheme issue. What did you see on tape? Was it effort?
I would say it's an effort issue, and I just spoke to the team today at 2:00, and I'm one that has access to all the information. Was at the game on the sidelines. I think it really came down to, I thought they were quicker to the first punch more often than we were, and I think that was just in, I think it leads back to your preparation. But the 2.3 is really what we use if you measure it, and it just to put mathematics to it. They finished better than we did. I thought they played better than we did at the end of each play. Not every play, but overall as far as the evaluation. So, and that's what we're focused on moving forward.
Okay, so he said that he doesn't believe it was an effort issue. And that's where I'm like, okay, some people are drawing the line between effort and execution. But he actually pointed to preparation, which is another thing that makes me wonder, because he didn't get specific about it, but I'm just like, is it that they just were hesitant because they weren't sure about what they were seeing? They weren't prepared to respond quickly and aggressively because they just weren't confident in what they were doing in response to what they were seeing from the Saints. I kind of wish he would have dived more into that, but I definitely understand why he didn't. Like, one, he didn't have to. Two, if that's something that you're planning to do differently or improve upon, you might want to keep that a secret. So I get it. But he uses that phrase, they were quicker to the punch, several times. And that makes me think that's one of the things that they're going to improve upon. How they're going to improve upon it, I'm not sure. They did a lot of talk about things that were going to be different in week 2 versus week 1 anyway, that we didn't necessarily see. Like Micah mentioned that Mike Zimmer was going to have some new packages for him to get chipped less. And if you saw that game, that was not necessarily the case. So yeah, we'll see what they do to hopefully be quicker to the punch. And it's like, we got to think about it. The Ravens are not a bad team. So the people who were concerned about them showing up in week 3 a little bit upset that they're 0-2, I feel like that's a legitimate concern. I feel like that's legit.
I'm Mike Todd Archer with ESPN. Kind of like what Clarence was saying, but why is the Shanahan offense giving this defense trouble? From Dan's scheme to what Mike has done, even Mike's time in Minnesota, they had some issues with facing that scheme as well.
Well, I think it's the run game's difficult. I mean, it's a commitment to run, run that run game, and there's benefits of it, and then there's things that why you go in a different direction. But yeah, it's tough to play if you don't play it all the time. There's no question about it. But at the end
okay, he said it's tough to play if you don't play it all the time. Does he mean play against? Hold on, let me go back.
The day still comes down to full time.
I'll see that all the time.
Well, I think it's the run game's difficult.
It's given this defense kind of like what Clarence was saying, but why is the Shanahan offense giving this defense trouble? From Dan's scheme to what Mike has done, even Mike's time in Minnesota, they had some issues with facing that scheme as well.
Well, I think it's the run game's difficult. I mean, it's a commitment to run, run that run game, and there's benefits of it, and then there's things that why you go in a different direction. But yeah, it's tough to play if you don't play it all the time. There's no question about it. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to fundamentals.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't totally understand what he was trying to say with that answer. He was asked about why the Shanahan style offenses are difficult for his defense, and one of the first things he says is the run game is difficult. And then he mentioned that it's tough to play against if you don't play it all the time. And I'm just like, but y'all see this relatively often. So, and then he says that it goes back to fundamentals. If y'all have an idea of what he's trying to say there, put it in the comments. But I'll be honest, and this doesn't happen a lot. That he lost me with that answer. Because I don't want to say that he's BSing us, but I'm also just like, okay, how does that answer the question? Cody says he don't want to admit that new scheme is better than his. I could see that being a possible reason. I'm just like, but like once you see them side by side like that, is there any point in hiding? But just, I mean, yeah, people are like that sometimes. Maybe. Anybody else got an answer as to what exactly is happening with this response? No? Okay. We'll continue. He's like, yeah, the run game is difficult. And I'm like, that's what we're going with? So that's why he says there are benefits of it and you choose to do something different. Okay. He said replay that part. He gives it away. Okay, we're gonna play it one more time. He said focus on the part where he said that's why he says there are benefits of it and you choose to do something different. All right, we're gonna listen for that.
John Michelle,
Things
they had some issues with an offense given this defense.
moving forward.
Mike Todd Archer with ESPN, kind of like what Clarence was saying, but why is the Shanahan offense given this defense trouble? From Dan's scheme to what Mike has done, even Mike's time in Minnesota, they had some issues with facing that scheme as well.
Well, I think it's the run game's difficult. I mean, it's a commitment to run, run that run game, and there's benefits of it, and then there's things that why you go in a different direction. But yeah, it's tough to play if you don't play the game, and there's benefits of it, and then there's things that why you go in a different direction. But yeah, it's tough to play if you don't play it all the time. There's no question about it. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to fundamentals.
Let me read some of y'all's comments. This is a fun game. JV says, I think he wants to say that he doesn't have anything to do with the defense. I hope he doesn't want to say that. He's the head coach. He might not be the defensive coordinator, but him being the head coach, like, yeah, he should know what's going on with the defense and be able to answer questions about it. So he doesn't get that out. He's not shoddy. Chris said, truth is, they really weren't doing anything special. I'm going to disagree with you there. They just were blowing our defense off the line. A lot of those runs were basic outside zones and tosses. I think some of them were. I'm going to say they did some things that were special and they blew the Cowboys defense off the line. I think both things are true. I cannot watch that defense and not be like, yeah, there's aspects of it that are definitely special. And to be fair, some of the most special parts of that offense have to do with who he has to work with. He's got he's got what some people might call a good canvas or good raw material, right? So there's a little bit of that to consider. But I also think that's a sign of a good coordinator to not just be like, hey, let's take these plays that always work, but hey, let me look at who I actually have to work with on this offense and how I can use them in ways that really make the most of their strengths, how I can use their strengths, their specific strengths against specific weaknesses of people on the defense of our opponents and actually create matchups, create scenarios that work to our benefit. So while it might not be anything that's like visually spectacular or that pops off the screen, it's like, oh, I've never seen anything like that. When you actually start looking at what they do, how they do it, and who they do it to, it's like, yeah, there's something different about the way he's running that offense that I feel like deserves to be acknowledged. Cody says it's a pre-snap motion that gets people out of position. A lot of it is that their pre-snap motion is probably one of the most unique parts of that offense. If I'm being real, it's one of the things that I think about that I'm just like, oh dang, they're doing some interesting things there. Chris came back and said he's saying that they don't see it that offense that often. Got to disagree there. I feel like they see components of it often enough to want to focus on making sure they can address it, which can make it harder to defend. But that's not an excuse. It comes down to the basics. Okay, so we've got a Mike McCarthy translator. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. All right. So after that, what's the next thing after that? He ends up talking about confidence in the run game. Let's see what he says about that.
John Machado with The Athletic. I was just wondering, kind of off of that, the run defense specifically, the defensive tackle position. What gives you confidence that you guys do have the answers for other teams?
Well, I mean, we made some technique adjustments that we need to be better at. I mean, we can't get gapped, and we were gapped, time and time again. That puts more pressure on your second level defenders, obviously your linebacker and your primary support elements. So, but yeah, we have to, it's that first step, the discipline and playing the technique and making sure the fit behind them is in order. And we definitely were not clean and we weren't consistent.
Now that answer was honest, but here's why I didn't like it. He was asked, what gives you confidence that you can respond to other teams' run games? And he basically gave her a bunch of reasons to not have confidence. Hold on, listen to this again, for real. Y'all tell me if I'm tripping.
Athletic. I was just wondering.
Today it still comes down to fundamentals.
John Machado with The Athletic. I was just wondering, kind of off of that, the run defense specifically, the defensive tackle position. What gives you confidence that you guys do have the answers for other teams?
Well, I mean, we made some technique adjustments that we need to be better at. I mean, we can't get gapped, and we were gapped, time and time again. That puts more pressure on your second level defenders, obviously your linebacker and your primary support elements. So, but yeah, we have to, it's that first step, the discipline and playing the technique and making sure the fit behind them is in order. And we definitely were not clean and we weren't consistent.
Yeah, he was asked what gives you confidence, and he listed a bunch of stuff that the run defense did not do well. I mean, hey, it's an honest answer. I can't be mad at that part. And maybe he didn't have a better answer for that question. But since we have an itemized list now, hopefully those are some things that are going to be worked on. Let me go to y'all's comments real quick. Chris, I mean, he might be right. I don't know Hankins that well. I hope he's not laughing at us, but he's got good reason. I don't know if Jonathan Hankins wanted to stay with the Cowboys or not, but seeing what we saw, it definitely does kind of make you wonder, why didn't they keep him around? Because to my knowledge, he wasn't asking for some exorbitant amount of money. That was just a ridiculous ask for someone at his level. So I don't know what happened there. Clement says, didn't we play the 49ers back-to-back seasons where they see this offense in the same in the last season playoffs versus Green Bay? This team isn't disciplined enough and playing techniques versus pre-snap motion. No, Clement, you're right. And that's kind of my point, because it's not even just the 49ers. There are other teams that we have faced that do things that are, I guess you could call Shanahan adjacent or Shanahan-esque, or at minimum use the pre-snap motion that we've all been talking about all night. And there are other teams that we're going to face for the rest of the season that also run similar offenses or offenses that have similar components. And so I'm thinking to myself, even if you look at a team that doesn't run the exact same thing, there are several teams that the Cowboys are going to face this season that all they would even have to do is just make a couple of tweaks. It's okay, we already are used to, running plays from under center. We'll do it a little bit more. Or we're already used to doing pre-snap motion. We'll just do it in this way instead of that way because we know we can trip the Cowboys up like this. Or like, oh, you see how they beat the run defense? Like, we can 100% do that. You see how, like, even the fact that there are stats out there talking about Micah Parsons being a little bit slower, you think people aren't going to be studying that film like, oh, there's a way to slow down Micah Parsons? Like, yes, how do we do that? And it's one of those things where it's like, even if you're not sure you can execute it perfectly, the idea of being able to slow down one of the best defensive weapons in the league is enough for them to try. They're going to at least try, and them at least trying might at least make us make a mistake. And we're talking about a league where a lot of the times, I mean, you know, we had a big scoring gap in week 1, and we had a big scoring deficit in week 2. But a lot of times these games come down to who can beat who on a snap, on a series, on one possession. It's not always, 2-3 scores difference. So it's not even like these teams have to become as good as the Saints are or as good as the 49ers are to beat the Cowboys. They can do just enough to make the Cowboys mess up just enough to where it goes from a W for the Cowboys to an L for the Cowboys. And those are the concerns that I really have, because I feel like the Dallas Cowboys, they're a talented team. I like the Cowboys players, but just what I've seen so far this season makes me think there's enough of a capacity to make enough mistakes to where they can, blow the season on a mistake here and there, because that is legit all it takes sometimes. All right. Let's see what else we want to talk about. Chris said, translation, defensive line is trash. Yes, the Mike McCarthy translator has spoken. That one I got. I speak enough Mike McCarthy for me to pick up on that. It's like, we didn't do this, or this. I'm like, okay, Mike, we got it. No confidence in the ability to defend against the run. Cool. Clement says, offense. The run defense comes down to mentality and beating your man off the ball. I said that in a show I did on Ray Ray's podcast, where I said, for everybody else on the field, football is a contact sport. For the guys in the trenches, it is a combat sport. And that does require a different mentality. So it comes down to mentality and beating your man off the ball. And then it's on the linebackers to beat the blocks of the fullbacks and tight ends. And you know what? That is something that, and I think Mike kind of alluded to it here about, it affecting everything behind them, because when the defensive linemen were doing really well, we heard a lot about how happy the linebackers were. We saw productive linebackers. We saw them able to do their jobs really well at a high level. And so now we're seeing this drop in effectiveness, right? And so you have to wonder if what they were seeing happening to the linemen, or what was happening to the linemen, affected what they were able to do a little bit more than what people are acknowledging. I'll just read a couple more before we get back to the video. Clement also says, no improve the defensive line comes back to Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones conserving money due to paying our stars who deserve their money, but you have to strengthen the areas of need, which we failed. Yeah, depending on how you're grading it. If it's pass fail, some people might give them a pass because, they improved at least in terms of depth, right? But if you're assigning letter grades or number grades, I could see you saying like, hey, you get a C- in some of this. So not mad at it. Toxic says, BLS, if Ridgeway didn't get away and Rodgers, things would be different. I'm going to let you have that hypothetical just because I'm too tired to like really think about it on that level. Okay, let's get back to the video. Where are we going next? We're going to fast forward a few minutes.
On Saturday, but Zach will be in that Wednesday vet group.
Scott. It's Connor Dixon with BAP. More specifically on the defense, the wild swing from week 1 to week 2. So good week 1, and then just couldn't get a stop in week 2. How do you kind of come out of that and evaluate
I
things?
think it really falls more in the category. It's never as good as you think it is, and it's never as bad as you think it is. Now, it was not good yesterday. I'm not saying that, but I stood here 7 days ago on a Monday and said we got a lot of work to do and won by 3 scores, and that wasn't lip service. We have a lot of work to do. We looked like a young, inexperienced football team at times in that game yesterday. That was my first impression when I finished watching all 3 phases last night. So then after going through all the eval with everybody, we need to be better. Our young guys are going to, they made some mistakes at unfortunate times that were costly, but that's part of playing young players. This many young players early, but so with that, I'm calling on the veterans to help pull us through those moments, and that starts in preparation.
At least he's honest. And what's interesting about what he said is that, he references the young, inexperienced players that made them look like a young, inexperienced football team. And I have yet to hear a lot of people actually mention those people by name. I'm going to see if any insights have been updated here, but I know Next Gen Stats put out some numbers on Tyler Guyton. I'm not going to call him out because I like him, and I'm pretty sure he's already beating himself up. So I won't go too deep into it, but I'm going to just state the facts. That's all I'm doing. Rookie left tackle Tyler Guyton allowed 5+ pressures for a second game in as many starts, all of which came against Chase Young in this particular game. They go on to say Young had 28 pass rushing matchups against Guyton and generated 5 pressures and 0.5 sacks. 5 out of 28 could be worse. 0.5 sacks could be worse. I'll give him that. Let's see what else that has nothing to do with rookies. I think that's the only part of the insights that actually specifically references a rookie. But yeah, I actually haven't heard people mention the rookies by name, like Tyler Guyton, Cooper Beebe. I haven't heard a lot of that. So it's interesting that he pointed to that as such a big issue. And it'll be interesting to see what he does to mitigate that. Especially with people with it being that people are calling for another rookie. Like, people want to see Flournoy out there. So, all right, let's keep going. He says something in a second about Dalvin Cook that I really want y'all to put a pin in. Or did I already miss it? Hold on, let's see.
Babe Loffenberg, 105.3 The Fan. Mike, so you coach long enough like you have games like this. Have you found, in high school you could run your team to death. Have you found that you kind of don't have to say too much because at this level these guys are embarrassed and they don't want to see the same thing happen again? Or how do you handle this?
Yeah, this is I think when harder has been maximum. Just make sure
thoughts when he does play down CBS Sports.
Being consistent with the players.
Garrett Footer, CBS Sports. What is your thought on where Jake Ferguson is at? And just can you also speak to kind of the intangible impact he brings when he does play? Dad kind of touched a little bit on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Jake's a big part of the heart and soul of that locker room. No question about it. I was told he had a good workout today, so that's good news. But we'll see how he comes in tomorrow and so forth. I mean, I'm hopeful he can play.
There were a lot of people who acknowledged that Jake Ferguson being out meant there were no threats up the seam. And that really impacted what the offense was able to do and also how they were defended against.
Mike Edwarder, WFA. You mentioned Dalvin Cook a few minutes ago. Could you give us a sense of how you view his physical readiness to play and his understanding of the offense and so forth at this point?
Dalvin looks good. Understanding that he's, a big thing for a vet is just the terminology, frankly, and just the language adjustment. And I think he's progressed very, very nicely since he's been here. He's as natural as an outside zone runner that I've competed against. He looks good. He's getting there.
So that was what I wanted y'all to put a pin in. He said that Dalvin Cook is the most natural outside zone runner that he's competed against. And so what I'm hoping that means is that when they finally do put Dalvin Cook in the game, that we're going to see some outside zone run concepts. And I would really appreciate that, especially since they're acknowledging that that's what he's best at. So that's why I was like, I don't know. He didn't really say when he's going to be ready. He said that he's coming along. But like when they do actually start using him, I just want y'all to all remember that, because I'm definitely going to come back to that point if for some reason they don't use him in that way. I'm going to be like, yo, McCarthy, you acknowledge that this is what he's good at. Why would you not do it? Ben's here. Hey, Ben, how's it going? Shout out to Ben Larimore of PFF. We let Ridgeway go because they refused to put Dak on IR. I don't know what that means. Or I don't know what situation you're talking about, I should say. I know what those words mean. Cody says, LMFAO, they going to run straight A-gap with him. See, that's the kind of stuff that's going to piss me off, Cody. I feel like you are in a press conference. Oh, he's the most natural outside zone runner I've ever competed against. A-gap. That will seriously piss me off. Clement says, I think that we have to see Zeke for inside runs and Dalvin Cook for outside zone runs. That's fair. That's fair. I'm okay with that. Even though I just feel like most of the inside runs just in general have not been successful. Well, no, they've done all right. Week 1, Zeke averaged 4 yards per carry, and they didn't average as many yards, but they did have a few runs between Rico and Zeke in week 2 that they got a good number of yards from. But I'm just saying, like, don't get in a press conference talking about Dalvin Cook is the most natural outside zone runner I've competed against, and then you don't use him that way. So, like I said, fingers crossed that actually happens, because that would mean different looks for our offense, which we need, and also a runner whose strengths we can actually use to improve the run game, which we also need. So I wasn't like really big on Dalvin Cook before. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, we got to see him like right now. But stuff like that does kind of put me on that bandwagon a little bit. Like, okay, if that's what we're going to get, yes, by all means, get him out there. Let's see. He talks after this about motion. I do a bad job of keeping notes, so I'm sorry. I don't remember what exactly he says about motion, but we're going to listen to it together.
Clarence. Speaking of just wild swings from week 1 to week 2, the snap counts for DeMario and Overshawn, that's a direct game week 1. What is he not doing to be in the base defense, and certainly seemed like impact player week 1? And what is the difference?
Okay, this isn't the answer about motion, but there's been a lot of controversy already about this response. And while he's saying this, I'm going to pull up a tweet from Patrick Nosey Walker that kind of expounds upon what Mike McCarthy is about to say.
Just think like anything, you got a new scheme, you got young players, you make decisions on training reps in base, training reps in sub. So, obviously last week he was primarily, going to be, part of the sub package. We weren't anticipate being in that much base going into the game, but that's the way the game went. So, those things happen.
John. Okay.
So he was asked about Overshown getting a lot of snaps in week 1, not as many in week 2. And, if you were watching both games, you know that Overshown showed out in week 1. A lot of people were impressed with his performance. And I don't think he did badly in week 2, which we'll talk about that in a second. But people wanted to, at minimum, see him on the field a little bit more. And so he was like, well, yeah, we're using Overshown in sub packages. We weren't using him in the base 3-4, and we didn't think we were going to run so much base in this game, but we did. And so there are some people who are like, that doesn't necessarily sound like a good reason. I don't know if I'm really buying that as a reason to not use someone who seems as skilled and as talented as Overshown. So there's been a little bit of a debate about whether or not that is a legitimate reason to. I'm trying to pull up this tweet. I don't see it. Hold on one second. But yeah, there have been some people who are debating about whether or not that's a legit reason to not put Overshown in the game that much. Like, does it make sense for someone who's as talented and as skilled as him to not be familiar with the base package? But I've got a screenshot. So it's not going to come up on your screen, but I'll read it to you. This is what Patrick Nosey Walker said earlier today. In reference to Overshown, he said, the coaching staff cites his return from a torn ACL and missed time in camp due to hip pointer as key reason he's playing catch up in base packages. I could see that as a legitimate reason. Also true that he's good to go now, so unleash him in base as well. Within reason, that allows for Maris Lufau to develop as well. Bottom line, more. So, when I was thinking about Overshown's snaps earlier, I hadn't thought about the fact that he was dealing with that injury in training camp and that he wasn't practicing for a while. And so basically what Patrick is saying is like, yeah, they want to use him in the base package, but he didn't have time to learn it. He's still catching up when it comes to that. So they just couldn't put him in there. And I think sometimes from the outside looking in, we don't necessarily notice all the time when players are struggling because they might be getting, feedback or input from someone next to them, or maybe they're good enough at faking it to where it looks okay to us. But the people who are on the field with them are kind of like, what on earth are you doing? That is the thing that happens. So for now, that doesn't sound like so bad of a reason to where I'm just like, that's BS. For now, I'm inclined to be like, okay, I'll buy it. Like the injury did happen, right? It's not like it didn't happen. It's like just a lot of us aren't thinking about it. We forgot. So the injury did happen. He did have to spend time not physically practicing in those packages. And so, yeah, by the time he was available, sounds like he was a good fit for the sub packages, still catching up with the base packages. So they didn't want to put him out there as much. All right, I get it. I'm okay with it. I'm going to go forward. Actually, no. I'm going to let him say what he's about to say, what he's going to say about motion. And then he's going to talk about the meaning of being quicker to the first punch. And then we'll end there. We don't really need to talk about the rest.
Mike Jones, WFAA. This question is kind of Shanahan offense related, but we see so much pre-snap motion now in today's NFL. Just kind of curious about maybe your history of coaching in football and maybe why we see so much of it now and maybe why it took so long for some of the offenses, I guess, to get to that point.
I think just like anything, I mean, everybody has a philosophy, the shifts in motions. I think if you watch historically football, I know in the 3 decades that I've been in, pro football had such a big effect on college football. And then let's say about 15 years ago, I think it's kind of now you're seeing the effect of college football that came into the pro game, and it's more in the passing game, the shotgun. When I first got in the league in the early 90s, I had quarterbacks that had never been in the gun. It was always under center. I'd never been in a shotgun until 2000. And then it obviously flipped. Now you got quarterbacks that come in and have never taken a snap under center. So my point is, I think that, the wide open offenses in college, out west, and hey, I was one of them used to stay up and watch the WAC and those games because they were doing some really cool things. It's different field, different spacing, and things like that. So I do think the college game has affected pro. I think that was definitely part of the migration there. And so because in the old days, everybody played either a 4-3 defense or just a 3-4. So, I just think it's part of the evolution of football. And I think that's why it's so important to just stay on top of the trends. When you hear about, offensive schemes and so forth, they're really being regenerated from past decades, because this game is about a cycle of scheme. And it just kind of, you just got to try to stay on the front end of it too. So, but why it took so long, I can't really, I don't have an opinion on it. I just think it's part of the trends, and people tried it, and the first guy that tried it was having success, and it'll always be a copycat league.
See, that's the point at which I would have asked to follow up, because honestly, to me, it sounded like the question that they asked was a roundabout way for them to ask why he's not using so much motion, but they asked about how he felt about the history of the motion. So let me go back. I did not realize he talked about that for a whole 2 minutes. So listen to the question one more time.
John. Mike Jones, WFAA. This question is kind of Shanahan offense related, but we see so much pre-snap motion now in today's NFL. Just kind of curious about maybe your history of coaching in football and maybe why we see so much of it now and maybe why it took so long for some of the offenses, I guess, to get to that point.
Yeah, so he was asked, why it's in the Shanahan type offenses, why they're being used now, why it took so long to be adopted. And I feel like I said, I think that was a roundabout way for that person to ask, like, okay, why is it taking you so long? But either way, he ends the response with, well, people started seeing success with it, and it's a copycat league. So that leads me to the question of like, what would have been a good follow-up, and also what what Chris is asking here is like, okay, so if you're acknowledging that people are seeing success and it's a copycat league, why aren't you copying it? But we don't really get an answer. He just kind of stops there. So I'm gonna just go from there. That's all we get, guys. I'll fast forward to the end in case you want to hear the end of his statement again, and then he's gonna talk about what it means to be quicker to the punch, and then we'll be done.
Offensive schemes and so forth, they're really being regenerated from past decades, because this game is about a cycle of scheme, and it just kind of, you just got to try to stay on the front end of it too. So, but why it took so long, I mean, I can't really, I don't have an opinion on it. I just think it's part of the trends, and people tried it, and the first guy that tried it was having success, and it'll always be a copycat league.
Joe.
Joe Hoyt, All City, Dallas. You mentioned being quicker to the first punch a couple times. I was just wondering if you kind of elaborate on the meaning of that and how you go about being quicker to the first punch.
Well, I just think it's like anything. You got to get lined up. Your assignment, and play your technique. As fast or faster than the other guy. I mean, so they got their hands on us a little quicker up front than we did to them. It's one area, breaking points and route running. So you can take that all the way through, the competitive area of the game.
Mike, Aaron Kazmas, Lone Star Live. This is obviously the first
All right,
time.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause it right there. So those were two questions in a row where it felt like he got really close to saying what a lot of people were listening for. And the question about the Shanahan offense is, hold on, let me get this off the screen. And the question about the Shanahan offense is, he mentions that people are seeing success with it and that it's a copycat league, but never quite gets to why he didn't copy it. And in the question about what it means to be quicker to the punch, he acknowledged that route running plays a role and things of that nature, but he didn't really talk about what they're going to do to combat that or to do better in that area. So my hope is that although he didn't say certain things out loud, that they are things that are on his mind. I think there are some people who try to talk about Mike McCarthy like he doesn't know what he's doing. I think he's a little bit more aware than what I think he's a little bit more aware than what he usually lets on, but I don't know. I can't pretend like there aren't things lacking in terms of the product that's being put on the field. So, hold on. Chris says his next interview, we should take shot every time he says, I think it's just like anything. No, we should not. We should absolutely not do that. You can do that. And when you're no longer active in the chat after about 5 minutes, we'll all understand why. But yeah, I am never doing that. Not on his next interview, not at a party ever. That is dangerous. So yeah, like I said, those last two questions, he got close to getting to what people were listening for, not quite there, but like we said earlier, it could be just him wanting to keep some things to himself so that future opponents don't kind of have a head start on what he's doing. Some of it's going to be obvious. Anybody who looks at film from yesterday is going to be like, okay, so we know they're going to make some changes to the run defense. Like, that's obvious. They just don't know what the changes are. Might even expect them to make some changes to the offense. If we find out that Dalvin Cook's elevated from what he said, we can anticipate, hopefully, some outside zone runs. So I do think we got a good bit of information, and the stuff that we didn't get, even if he doesn't have an answer that he's holding on to, hopefully at minimum, it puts some things on his mind. Clement says, interesting stat. Cowboys are 11-12 against teams with winning records in the last 3 seasons. That is an interesting stat. It's probably something that's going to come up a lot on the 4-letter networks this week. Speaking of stats, that was one of the things that I wanted to bring up about Overshown before we got out of here, because there's been a little bit of a buzz that Overshown didn't do anything when he was on the field. So Overshown had 18 defensive snaps, and he was credited with 4 tackles, all solo tackles. So 4 tackles, that's almost 25% if you're like, tackles for every, per the number of snaps that he took. And it's especially significant considering that they were all solo. The only people who were credited with more tackles than him was Kalen Carson, Trevon Diggs, and Damone Clark. So, and they all had like twice the number of snaps he had or more. So I think when you put that into perspective, in terms of what he did with the number of snaps that he had to do it, I think he still deserves credit for being productive. And the issue wasn't his performance, it was just the number of snaps. But numbers like that, that's exactly why people wanted to see him be on the field more. So I don't know how long it's going to take him to get integrated into these base packages, but I just know when I started looking at the Saints, Overshown was one of those people who I really wanted to see him on the field, because I was like, his speed is something that would be very useful against a team like the Saints. But we didn't really get to make use of it as much as I think would have been good for the Cowboys. So, there are some things that happened during the game that were because of decisions made by the coaches. There were some things that happened because of limitations of the personnel, and there were some things that happened because Jake Ferguson's injured, because Overshown is still catching up from when he was injured. So I do feel like there's several things that you can point to, and it sounds like right now most people on the page are pointing to the effort and execution of the players, and a little bit towards scheme, especially on the offensive side. I feel like on the defensive side, a lot of people are already forgiving Zimmer, whereas on the offensive side, it's just like, nah, we need better plays. Like this is not gonna cut it. So like I said, I definitely encourage you to try to watch film. Even if you have access to the broadcast view, rewatch it and just look at the time it takes for the Cowboys plays to develop versus the time that it takes the New Orleans Saints to develop. Like, it really is night and day. And it really does make you think, like, is that really the best way for this offense to operate? So anyway, Chris says we need to unask. What does that mean? Is that the word you meant to use? We need to unask some of these comp picks that we're getting and make some trades. What was I about to say? Oh yeah. So like I said, I haven't watched as much film or listened to as many pressers as I would like. Still got to work tomorrow. So I don't know how much of that I'll actually get to. So I'm going to say this. If I hear something or see something that I feel is like really significant, I'll talk about it tomorrow, and then we'll officially put the Saints game to bed after that. And it would have to be something that really stands out, because like I'm done talking about this already. I'm ready to move on to talking about the Ravens. And if not, then I'm going to try to do a litigation Tuesday tomorrow. And by that, I mean talking about some of the legal issues going on in the sports world that are of interest to people. Fun fact, because I know a lot of people are waiting for me to give an update on Dak Prescott's case. The hearing for sanctions for his accuser has been pushed back to October 29th. So for those who haven't been keeping up, basically the motion to dismiss the last filing by the accuser was granted by the judge. And the judge was like, not only am I going to dismiss this, I believe the argument that you brought to the court is frivolous. What was it? Frivolous. It wasn't frivolous charges. I don't remember what it was, but it was something like that, like charges, like accusations, something like that. But the judge was like, okay, that's frivolous. In other words, saying like, hey, you have no basis, no standing for anything that you're saying about this man. And so because of that, you're going to have to be penalized in some way. So there's supposed to be a hearing to determine how exactly that was going to play out. It was going to happen this past Friday It's been moved to late October. So if I hear anything related to that, I will definitely share that. And it may not be on a litigation Tuesday. It may be like breaking news. It may be on a Thursday or Friday, and I just go live and I'll be like, okay, y'all need to hear this. But yeah, if I don't have anything else to talk about from the Cowboys, I do want to kind of have a conversation about what's going on with the NCAA. I don't know if y'all know this, but the NCAA is dealing with several lawsuits that will play a big role in how they're going to govern this whole NIL situation that's happening. I personally think they jumped into that whole thing way too quick. Not that they had much of a choice. A lot of the things that they did in terms of classifying collegiate athletes as student athletes and saying that was the reason that they didn't deserve to be paid for what they're doing. You know, it happened decades ago, but it's coming back to bite them in really big ways. And now they're dealing with like just a lot happening at once and very quickly that they have to comply with for legal reasons. And so basically they have multiple lawsuits that have come up that they have to take care of, not only because, you know, the people who filed the lawsuits have a good standing for saying like, hey, the decisions that you made impacted my life in this way. And now Congress has come and said like, you should have never done that in the first place. So pay up. But also how they handle those situations can determine what ends up happening in the future for collegiate athletes. Because like, while we're all celebrating NIL, some of the things that we have to keep in mind is that collegiate athletes, they don't have a union. They don't have a players association. There's no CBA in place, right? So a lot of the things that happen by default for professional athletes, whenever they're negotiating things like revenue shares or revenue splits with the owners, that hasn't necessarily been decided on the collegiate level. They only just decided that schools could pay students directly as opposed to going through some collective. So while it's still called NIL, which stands for name, image, and likeness, if you look at what's actually happening in a lot of these situations, it's outright pay to play. It's not even name, image, and likeness situations. It's like we're paying you to play. And they do not have a lot of the protections in place that they need to handle. And by they, I mean the NCAA and the athletes, honestly, because there's one school, is it Georgia? It might be Georgia. It's either Georgia or Ohio, one of those schools, that has started fining their student athletes, or at least the football players, for certain for certain violations. And I'm like, yo, how are you fining collegiate athletes with no CBA? Who's negotiating this? Who's deciding what's fair? So like, it's crazy, y'all. So I'll either discuss that tomorrow, or if I see anything interesting coming up on the Cowboys side, we'll discuss that. Or if I have enough time, maybe we'll do both. But as usual, if there's anything that y'all want to talk about, if y'all have any comments, questions, emotional outbursts in response to anything that you've heard me say today, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, hit my DMs, and we can talk about it. So, but for right now, I don't know if y'all could hear it, but the mic was definitely picking up my stomach growling. I know it's late, but I'm about to grab a snack before I go to bed. But thanks y'all for joining in. Hold on, let me see what Ben said real quick, because Ben doesn't leave comments a lot. He said, Overshawn had some trouble getting off blocks in this game, but the LBs were getting climbed on by the offensive line frequently. This is facts. And he said, they don't have one yet. And I'm not sure what he's referring to. But there's a few things that they don't have yet. So you're right. But yeah, on that note, I need to get a snack because I cannot go to sleep with my stomach growling. So I will see y'all at some point during the week. Work schedule pending. Sorry, Chris. Yes, I have to leave, but I'll be back. Keep those notifications on. This has been another fun episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host, Jazz Monet, and I'm out.